In 1983, two icons collided, not in a race for glory, but in a shared mission to rewrite the American performance playbook. At a time when the muscle car dream had faded into a distant memory, Lee Iacocca and Carroll Shelby joined forces to prove that Detroit still had heart, and maybe even a trick or two left up its sleeve. The 1960s had been all about raw power, V8 thunder, and quarter-mile showdowns. But the 1980s? That was survival mode. Gas shortages, rising insurance rates, stricter emission laws, and shifting consumer tastes had all but suffocated the fire that once roared under hoods across the country. The American performance car was in trouble, deep trouble. Lee Iacocca, once the hero behind the Ford Mustang, had just taken the helm at Chrysler after being ousted from Ford in a very public power struggle. Chrysler wasn't just struggling, it was dying. Bankruptcy loomed. Morale was rock bottom. But Iacocca wasn't a man who backed down. And he knew he couldn't win this fight with practicality alone. He needed magic. He needed muscle. He needed Shelby. Chrysler's last stand and the resurrection of a name. Back in the late 70s, Chrysler's reputation had tanked. The assembly lines churned out cars with reliability issues, outdated designs, and the kind of quality that pushed loyal buyers straight into the arms of Japanese and European competitors. Honda and Volkswagen were offering something America had forgotten: cars that worked, lasted, and didn't guzzle gas. Iacocca's turnaround began with federal loan guarantees and the creation of the fuel-efficient K-car platform. It was smart, it was practical, but it lacked soul. People didn't dream about K-cars, they tolerated them. And Iacocca knew that without reigniting passion, Chrysler wouldn't just fail, it would disappear. So Chrysler dusted off a nameplate that once meant something: Charger. Now, the 1981 Dodge Charger wasn't the fire-breathing V8 beast of the late 60s. It wasn't even rear-wheel drive. It was a compact hatchback born from the Dodge Omni 024. But the badge still mattered. Charger evoked memories of highway legends and tire smoke. It was Chrysler saying, "We remember what performance feels like, and we're working on it." At this point, Dodge wasn't trying to win back the past. It was trying to find its place in the present. And while the 1981 Charger was more symbolic than sensational, it laid the groundwork for something radical. Because behind the curtain, Carroll Shelby was taking notes. Carroll Shelby returns, and he's not playing it safe. Carroll Shelby didn't need this. By the early 80s, he had already made his mark. On the track, in the showroom, and in the history books. The Cobra, the GT350, the Daytona Coupe, legends, everyone. But Shelby had retired, frustrated with the business and struggling with health issues. And yet, when Iacocca reached out and said, "I need you to make this thing fast," Shelby listened. The challenge wasn't building another big block bruiser. It was turning a modest front-wheel drive economy car into something that could run with the hot hatch crowd. Volkswagen GTIs, Peugeot 205s, even Porsche's baby 924. These were nimble, efficient, and European, but they weren't untouchable. Shelby accepted the challenge. He didn't want to build another Cobra. He wanted to build something smarter. In 1983, the Dodge Shelby Charger was born. It wasn't loud, it wasn't brash, but it was focused. Shelby re-engineered the suspension, firmed up the ride, sharpened the steering, and adjusted the gear ratios for maximum punch. The visual upgrades, stripes, spoilers, scoops, weren't there to show off. They served a purpose. Everything did. And under the hood, a humble 2.2-liter inline-4 single overhead cam. Not exotic, not flashy, but light, reliable, and willing to be pushed. With Shelby's tuning, it came alive. This wasn't about brute strength. It was about driving feel. How the car communicated with the driver. How it made you feel confident, engaged, connected. That's what Shelby was building. An experience. The unexpected evolution from Charger to GLHS. By 1987, Shelby had refined his vision. He wasn't satisfied with just fast for a hatchback. He wanted something devastating, something that could punch above its weight and leave European performance cars in the dust. Enter the Dodge Shelby GLHS. Those four letters weren't corporate approved. They came straight from Shelby himself. Goes like hell some more. And that wasn't just a joke. It was a threat. The GLHS took the 2.2-liter turbocharged engine and cranked it up. 175 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque. That may not sound like much today, but in a car weighing just over 2,500 pounds, it was a revelation. It could go from 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. The quarter mile, mid-14s. Not bad for a front-wheel drive car built in the shadow of bankruptcy. But what really made the GLHS special wasn't just power, it was control. Kone adjustable shocks, High-grip Goodyear tires, tighter sway bars. This thing didn't just accelerate, it gripped. Inside, there was no pretense of luxury, just purpose. Manual transmission, bucket seats, a Shelby badge, a numbered plaque. Each of the 1,000 GLHS cars was hand-assembled at Shelby's facility in Whittier, California. They weren't just built, they were crafted. And if you think this was all smoke and mirrors, think again. In a legendary comparison by Hot Rod magazine, the GLHS went head-to-head with Shelby's own 1965 GT350 Mustang. The GLHS beat it cleanly. It didn't roar, it didn't pose, it performed. Legacy that echoed louder than sales. Only 1,000 GLHS Chargers were ever made, and between 1983 and 1987, fewer than 25,000 Shelby Chargers hit the road. That's a blip compared to other nameplates, but the impact? It was massive. This wasn't about mass appeal, it was about proving a point, that America could build a turbocharged front-wheel drive car that didn't just compete, it embarrassed the competition. European cars had finesse, Japanese cars had reliability, but this little Dodge, it had guts, it had precision, it had Shelby. The formula, lightweight chassis, turbocharged engine, sharp handling, would become the blueprint for future Dodge projects. The Spirit RT, the Neon ACR, the SRT4, all of them carried Shelby's fingerprints, whether people knew it or not. And yet, the Shelby Charger is rarely celebrated. Maybe because it didn't fit the muscle car mold. Maybe because it came from a time when Detroit was still licking its wounds. Or maybe because it never needed the spotlight. It just needed the open road. A forgotten Eurofighter built in America. The Shelby Charger wasn't built to win over purists. It was built to challenge assumptions. It didn't look powerful, it didn't growl, but it moved like lightning and handled like a scalpel. And for those who got behind the wheel, it redefined what American performance could mean. This was a car born from crisis, economic, cultural, and mechanical, and yet, it stood tall. In Turbo, the performance revolution, Mike Ankus captures the spirit of the turbocharged age, when manufacturers, backed into corners, got creative. The Shelby Charger was one of its finest examples. To this day, collectors and enthusiasts see the GLHS as a unicorn, a misunderstood masterpiece, a car that dared to be different when conformity seemed safer. Because real legends don't always wear chrome. Sometimes they wear stripes, they run quiet, they punch hard, and when the dust settles, they're the ones still standing. Final thoughts. The Dodge Shelby Charger wasn't the loudest. It wasn't the flashiest. But it might have been the most important performance car Chrysler ever made in the 80s. Not because it sold millions, but because it proved that American ingenuity, when pushed to the edge, still had the power to surprise the world. It didn't need a big block V8, it didn't need a convertible top. All it needed was a team that believed in making something that mattered, and they did. So, the next time you see a dusty old Shelby Charger, or a GLHS sitting quietly at a car show, don't walk past it. Look closer. You're not just seeing a Dodge, you're seeing a philosophy, a rebellion, a machine that whispered when others screamed, and still crossed the finish line first.